Welcome back, everyone. Dr. Bill Angel is with us today from OSU Lima, looking back on the State of the Union address from last night. The first 12 minutes, probably rightly so, dealt with the Ukraine situation. How did you think things started out?
I thought it was very strong beginning, and particularly since I think that Ukrainian thing, oddly enough, has basically helped Biden's presidency. His poll numbers are way, way down. But he's shown leadership in working us through this crisis, getting NATO behind the sanctions that we wanted to employ, not doing it on our own, but getting NATO to go along, and showing just how important that alliance is.
Yeah. How
important that alliance is in this very dangerous world we're living in.
Last night, the Ukrainian officials stood up and got a standing ovation. You rarely get moments during that speech that kind of choke you up a little bit. That was pretty poignant.
Yeah, it was a unifying moment.
Yeah.
Because usually you watch the State of the Union address, and the one side is sitting while the other side is standing.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that way for much of that speech.
Yeah, there were other things that people, I know Republicans before the speech said, is he going to talk about inflation? Is he going to talk about defunding the police? And I felt like most of those issues he addressed, at least in some way.
He addressed them in a way in which he said, for example, about defunding the police, is we should fund the police. Right. We need reform, but we need to fund the police. We need them to provide order. So, I mean, it's almost like he took that issue away and put it on the table. So he's not in favor of defunding the police. That's something from the way far left. And so he kind of stepped away. He's already referred to Biden's socialist agenda is what you hear. And so he's kind of stepped away from that sort of far left-wing part of the Democratic Party.
I heard a GOP rebuttal talking about inflation and gas prices and those kind of things, which he addressed, but they wanted more forceful action, saying, this is what I'm going to do about it. Were you okay with what he said?
Inflation's hard to control. I mean, it really is hard to control because a lot of it's based on spending. And he addressed that last night. He says part of the reason we have inflation is because there are more people working and they're making more money and they're spending more money, and that's going to create the inflation. So, I mean, he addressed that pretty well.
Yeah, Chris Christie came out and talked about, he was on some of the talk shows talking about oil production. Our nation produces the most oil of any country, but he said that we could be producing more, and Biden didn't talk about that. Is there more things you think he could be done, or was that addressed well?
I think there are more things that he had to address. I mean, part of the issue with the sanctions we're applying to Russia is going to have a dramatic effect on the oil prices anyway. So we're going up at any rate. And I mean, there's not a lot of pressure that we can apply on that whole issue because of the power of the oil industry and the need for the oil industry.
Yeah. He didn't mince words too much on Putin. He obviously not a fan last night, was he?
He didn't go after him directly or personally. I mean, that was one thing that he just didn't go after anybody personally.
Yeah.
It was a simply State of the Union. This is what I've done. This is what I'd like to do, and we're going to go through this together. And he said one thing he said very importantly: it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
It's going to be okay. You know, that's the kind of thing, I say to my daughter or to my grandchildren.
Sure.
It's going to be okay. It was really a very, very powerful moment, that very simple statement.
I think a lot of presidents in the past have taken the State of the Union too as a way, if they can, to address what they've done, tout some of the things they've done. He talked about infrastructure.
He talked about infrastructure and talked about things he'd like to do. He mentioned the voting rights issue, which still needs to be passed. But, he basically didn't go after any of the state legislators that are trying to restrict access to the polls. But he talked about how voting rights still needs to be protected.
Yeah.
And that's still an agenda. He hasn't forgotten about it.
Yeah. Anything else that stood out about it that you thought, I wish he'd address this more, or I felt like he handled it pretty well?
I think he handled things pretty well. I mean, the problem with the State of the Union address is it goes into like kind of a list of things that they want to do,
right,
or a list of things they want to accomplish. And there was some of that, but I thought most of it addressed some of the issues that he's attempted to accomplish, like infrastructure improvement and the voting rights bill, which we just talked about. But I think he more or less kept it on focus and didn't just give us a laundry list of things, a wish list of things he wants to do. Here's things he's still working on.
Real quick, Joe Manchin sat with the Republicans last night. Was that a good thing or a bad thing, showing that, hey, we can work together, or was it? Well,
there was that moment, I think, during the Trump era where Democrats and Republicans sat with each other.
Right, they used to.
Address a speech to kind of make the point. And so I think he was just simply, Manchin was trying to go back to be kind of old school on this.
Yeah.
And he also, Manchin, frankly, relishes his role as kind of a rogue Democrat.
He's the decider. It's down to him.
He's the decider. Yes, he's a deciding vote. And he wanted to let the Democrats know that.
Yeah. It was interesting. All right, thank you. We appreciate it, Bill. Good seeing you. Don't go away. Medical news coming up next on Noon Edition.